I'm Yafra Khan from Skill Curve, and in today's session, we're going to learn to implement an end-to-end project from AWS. Here's the solution diagram for this lab. The project is called the Smart Shopping List, which adds items to a shopping list and stores them to a DynamoDB table. This project has some prerequisites such as Node.js version 12.x or later, as it is required for running NPM. NPM version 5.x or later because we will be using it to install dependencies and running the project on localhost. Git version 2.14.1 or later because we will be cloning a GitHub repository to our local machine for this project. Visual Studio Code installation for editing and exploring our code, as well as creating an AWS account which will sync our application to AWS. The explanation of the installation of these resources is beyond the scope of this lab, but the links for them will be provided in the video description. As we will be using Amplify CLI to carry out this lab, let us understand briefly what is Amplify and what we'll be using it for. AWS Amplify is a set of purpose-built tools and features that lets front-end web and mobile developers quickly and easily build full-stack web applications on AWS by adding various AWS services to our application along the way. Here are some use cases for which we'll be using Amplify in this lab. Firstly, we can easily add user authentication to our application using the Cognito user forms. It gives us the functionality of sign in, sign up, and account recovery. Moreover, we can add API to our application, which can either be REST API or GraphQL API in order to interact with the database to create the table as well as to query the data. Furthermore, we can easily add a prediction module to our application through Amplify, such as the identification of image labels. Finally, we can host our applications on the cloud using Amplify. As we are using NPM for handling our package dependencies as well as installing and running our application on the local host, let us briefly see what it is. NPM or Node Package Manager is a JavaScript package manager which gives us control over our dependencies. So we can easily install our dependencies of the project through the command npm install package name, which injects a dependency into our JavaScript file. npm start is the command used to launch our application to the local host. The first step is to clone the GitHub repository that we will be using in this lab. We will be using AWS Amplify CLI to carry out all the functionality of our project. We will look at this diagram with each step being executed. Now change the directory to the clone repository folder. So the next step is to install the necessary NPM packages in the project folder. To do that, we go to command prompt. Now we need to install all the necessary NPM packages in the project folder. For that, we will run the npm install command. This will take a while to execute. Now that the necessary packages have been installed to our project folder, we will see how our front end currently looks. To do that, run the npm start command. Okay, so as we can see, our front end has been rendered. Currently, this is just a dummy app with no functionality behind all the buttons. In order to add our functionality, we will run some commands and edit the code using our code editor. Now we will open the Smart Shopping List project in the Visual Studio Code. You can see that we have two main folders, which are public and SRC. The public folder has the HTML, index.html file. The SRC folder has our index.js and app.js, as well as two subfolders, which are API and components. So all the components on our app.js in the front end are fetched from these four components, which are item card, nav bar, prediction card, and table card. Our backend functionality will be added to the API folder using db.js and prediction.js. So currently db.js has only the function definitions, but no functionality inside. Same with the prediction.js. Now the next step is to install the Amplify CLI and some other dependency into our project folder through the npm command. To install the Amplify CLI into our project, we will be using this command. Now the next step is to initialize the Amplify project from a root folder. For that, we run this command. What this command does is that it initializes our project and connects it to the cloud using the default parameters in AWS default profile. After this command is executed successfully, we can go to the Amplify through AWS Management Console and check our project has been deployed there. So our AWS project has now been initialized successfully. To verify, we can go to our AWS Management Console and search for AWS Amplify. Now we can see our Smart Shopping List project deployed over here. Now that we have all the dependencies installed, we can add the backend functionality to our project. Firstly, we will add the Cognito authentication module to our project as depicted in the solution diagram. For that, we need to run the following command. Now the CLI will prompt us for some options. So we will choose default configuration. And when asked that, do you want the users to be able to sign in? We will choose username and we'll choose no, I am done. Now our authentication backend has been created using the Cognito user and identity pools, and that has been connected to our Amplify project. Next, we need to edit the front end to add the authentication module. To do that, we will first go to the index.js in our project on Visual Studio Code Editor. So here we will see that some authentication functionality has been commented. We will just uncomment it. We will also add the Amplify Authenticator tag over here. Amplify Authenticator is a React component that adds a sign-in and sign-up functionality to our React application. Next, we will go to our app.js. For listening to the sign-in events, a hub module can be added. We will uncomment the following import. We will also uncomment the hub module over here. The main functionality of the hub module is to fetch the backend data whenever a new sign-in event occurs. Next, we will go to the navbar.js under the components folder. Here we will uncomment the import auth from AWS Amplify. We will also uncomment the await auth.signout statement. Now we need to push our changes to the cloud using the Amplify push command. We will enter yes over here. So after the successful execution of our Amplify push command, we can look in our repository on the VS Code under the Amplify folder and the backend subfolder. We have an auth folder with the Cognito user pool name over here. Now we can run our app again to check the Cognito authentication included in our application. We can run the npm start command again. Okay, so now we can see our sign-in page. Since this is our first time, we will need to create the account. Now we get to our application's main page. After we sign up, our login details are saved in the Cognito user pool that was generated by Amplify. To check the details, we will go to AWS Management Console and search for Cognito in the search. So in the user pools, we will go to our user that has been generated by Amplify. Now we can see the details that we entered during our sign up. The next step is to use Amplify to create the necessary infrastructure for generating GraphQL API and integrate it to the DynamoDB. Now we will choose single object with fields option. Now we will be asked if we want to edit the schema now. We'll enter yes. And then we'll edit the schema through our Visual Studio Code Editor. Go to Amplify, then Backend, and then API. Here we can see some files generated by Amplify in the API folder. Go to schema.graphql, and here we can edit the schema according to our requirement. Now we'll replace the schema with our own schema. And here what we are doing is that we are only allowing the owner the operations to create, update, delete, and read from the database. Again, we will run the Amplify push command. Now that our code successfully has been pushed to the cloud, you can see some files generated in our repository. So here in the backend, you can see some files in the API section generated. In the GraphQL folder, we have mutation.js, queries.js, schema.json, and subscription.js. With these files, our DynamoDB table and all the backend queries for the CRUD operations required have been auto-generated when we add the GraphQL API through Amplify. Now, for integrating the API to the frontend, we need to write some code in the db.js file. So here we have empty functions. We need to add code to add functionality. Firstly, we import these libraries. Firstly, we are importing API and also auth from AWS Amplify, since we need to have a way to identify a user with each item. Then we are importing queries and mutations that were generated by Amplify. First, we need to add the code in the getUserItems function. So in the getUserItems function, firstly, we are fetching the current authenticated user by await auth.current authenticated user. If the user is not logged in, an empty list will be returned. We will then use the shop list variable to call the GraphQL API. We will now query the data in the list the items, when the page loads. We also have the auth mode parameter, which is very important as it tells GraphQL that the user is authenticated by the Amazon Cognito user pools. We'll then console.log the data that has been returned. The function then returns the items that have been fetched from our executed query. Next, we need to add the code in the add item function. The add item function is called when the user clicks the add button. This function takes an item name as the parameter. First, we initialize the item name variable and assign it to the item details list. Next, we create the query for the GraphQL API, which uses mutations to call the create shopping list item function. The query then takes item details list as input. We also set the auth mode as before. This function returns the data passed to the added item query using the create shopping list item function. Finally, we need to add the code in the delete item function. This function is called when the delete icon is pressed. This function takes item ID as parameter. So this function takes an item ID in the item details list. The GraphQL query consists of mutations.delete shopping list item function and item details as input as well as the auth mode. The function then returns the deleted item. Now that we're done with our code in the db.js file, we can run our application once again. Now, when I click the delete icon against an item, it will be deleted. So now our list has meat and eggs as its items. To check our changes in the DynamoDB database, we'll go to DynamoDB from the AWS Management Console. In the tables, we have the shopping list item table that has been auto-generated. When we click on this table, we can see 2 items returned. So the data consists of ID, type name, created at, item name, owner, and updated at. Now the next step is to add an image recognition component to our project, through which our list item can be generated from an image when we upload it. Amplify provides predictions category, allows us to quickly integrate Amazon AI services to our frontend. To add the object recognition to our project, we run the following Amplify command. So we'll choose identify over here since we are going to identify labels. Now that our push command has been executed, we need to integrate a predictions component to the front end. For that, firstly go to the index.js. We'll uncomment this import, which is the Amazon AI predictions provided from AWS Amplify/predictions. And we'll then uncomment this line. We'll then go to the prediction.js file under the API folder. So here, firstly, we'll import the predictions component from the AWS Amplify. In a get labels from image function, we'll have the following code. So we use the get labels from image function and use predictions variable to identify the labels from our image. The source for the label is our image file, and the function returns the prediction labels that are mapped with the list item name. Now we'll run our app again with the npm start command. So our predictions component was able to give us options in text related to our image. We click the suitable text and we can see this item added to our list. Until this point, we have been connecting our web application through the local host. Now we will host our web app through AWS Amplify using the resources which we have already deployed to the cloud. For that, we will go to command prompt. So now we can see a URL that has been generated by Amplify for our web app. So we can see that our app is running and all the necessary functionality has been deployed and hosted on the AWS. I hope this tutorial clearly explains all the steps involved in creating a React app that uses cognitive authentication and graph URL API for backend database handling, as well as identifying labels from an image and hosting our website on AWS Amplify.